Well, we want to say hello again. I'm Joe Roberts, your host for this Mayfield Friday Time program this November the 12th, 2021. With me is our producer, Jamie Roberts. He is in the background, but you're going to hear from him a little bit tonight with our subjects that we have on. Our co-host, Pastor Bernie Dixon, is with us again this evening, and good to have you back, brother.
I feel good. Wasn't doing too good last week, but I'm back in the saddle again.
Back in the saddle again.
Yeah.
All right. Online with us is our guest co-host, Brother John Scott Raish. And our other guest co-host, Pastor Dan Curtis, will not be with us in the second half of the program like he usually is because of prior commitments. We're so glad you have tuned in to our program this evening. We've got several things lined up for you. Actually, our discussions, and get that to you in just a minute. Our desire is, though, that we may be a blessing to you this evening. We do hope that you'll stay with us for the second half of the program, where we're going to discuss fact or fiction subject. Jesus died on Friday. And you may double take on that, but that's okay. Just hang in and you'll see what we got. As is our custom, here is my co-host, Pastor Bernie Dixon, to give us an overview of this coming Sunday's message. Pastor, and then bring us a devotion there.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to Sunday, and I would encourage folks to tune in. I'll be dealing with the subject, It's a Wonderful Life, out of the book of Psalms, chapter 118, verse number 23 through 24, and of course, my wife asked me, is Jimmy Stewart going to be there? And I said, well, you just have to wait and see. No, he's not. He's not going to be there. But
is he still alive?
No, I think he croaked off a long time ago.
I thought so.
And we're not going to have him standing in the corner, stiff as a board or cutouts or anything. But the whole aspect of that message is what really makes our life wonderful, and we're going to look at it and what makes it wonderful to be a Baptist too, brother. I
right.
Tell you.
Amen.
It is wonderful. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but in fact, there's things with this area talking about our devotion. So anyway, Sunday morning, please tune in if you possibly can. And if you're in the area, we'd love to have you come to 271 Mayfield Drive here in Smyrna, Tennessee. We'd love to have you come.
All right, you got the overview?
And that's the overview of my sermon. Little quick tidbits. I'm not going to give you too much, but.
Okay. All right. Man, if I blinked, I'd have missed it.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of like going through Polk City, Florida. If you blink, you go, well, it's not that small anymore.
Not that small now.
Oh, well, there's a little town in Florida called Two Eggs. You might miss that if you blink it, but. I've never been there. Have you ever been to Two Egg, Florida?
No. I've been to, what is that? Yeehaw Junction?
Yeah, Yeehaw Junction.
Yeah, Yeehaw Junction. It's just, it used to be just 4 buildings on each corner of the.
That was just past Mulberry, and you go on. My uncle used to live out there, and yes, if you blinked, you might miss that. So I don't know if it's grown up or not. Everything else has grown up.
It's been years since I've been through Yeehaw Junction.
Oh, yeah.
Well, all right, brother, let's get on here with it.
I've been kind of, my mind has been going in all kinds of
directions.
Well, it always does anyway. but I've been trying to understand why we're seeing a decline in, I'd say, churches or Christianity, and there seems to be more of a growth in worldliness. And I ran across 2 articles. One of them is Knowns on the Rise. I didn't say gnome. I said known. These are.
Would that be nuns?
No, N-O-N-E. Known. No, they're not affiliated. Not.
Yeah.
They don't go around with little pointy hats and live in the garden, But anyway, I found this very interesting, and it has explained a lot. And I preached on this in Jeremiah. I'll just come back this before I deal with Jeremiah. But according to the Pew Research Center, the the number of Americans who do not identify with any religion, those are the knowns, continue to grow in a rapid pace. 1/5 of the U.S. public and 1/3 of the adults under 30 are religiously unaffiliated. That's kind of a I don't understand that, but anyway, the highest percentage ever in Pew Research Center polling. This was in 2012. So this amount, be aware, the statistics I give you are going to be higher in almost 10 years later. But it went on further a little bit further, and it said 46 million unaffiliated adults are religious or spiritual in some way. That's their idea of religious. So go a little bit further. Two-thirds of them say they believe in God. That's 68%. More than half say that they often feel a deep connection with nature and the earth. Tree huggers. 58%, while more than the third classify themselves as spiritual but not religious at 37%. And 1 in 5, 21%, say that they pray every day. These are people that are not affiliated with any kind of church. In addition, most religiously affiliated Americans think that the churches and other religious institutions benefit society by strengthening community bonds and aiding the poor. The growth in number of religiously unaffiliated Americans, sometimes called the rise of the gnomes. That would be a spooky movie, wouldn't it? Well,
yeah, I'm afraid it would.
Yes, is largely driven by a generational replacement, the gradual supplanting of the older generation by the newer ones. This is what we were talking about, Brother Joe, when we said that the quality of pastors are not the same quality as years ago.
Right.
And I think that the devastating effects will come after our generation is gone. But anyway, said these generational differences are consistent with other signs of gradual softening of religious commitment among some, though by no means all Americans in recent decades. Pew Research Center surveys conducted over the last 10 years, for example, find modest growth in the number of people who say they seldom or never attend religious services, as well as declining number who say they never doubt the existence of God. 46 million unaffiliated adults are religious. Oh, I can even move on to the next one. I just covered that one. I need to turn the page. I'm going to go over here. The Protestant share of population, by contrast, has been declining since the early 1990s. Now, by the way, I don't include Scriptural Baptist churches, but we can say you can add that in that group. When we say Protestant, and I want folks to understand this, that the majority of Baptists that are out there consider Baptists as Protestants. And I want to make it very clear, Baptists, as far as true Baptists, have never been Protestant. And I will say it again, true Baptists have never been Protestant.
Yeah, I say amen again.
We didn't come out of the Catholic Church. We never protested them. We were never part of the Reformation. Baptists have always been, since Jesus Christ has established that New Testament church, when he called those 12, started out 12 men, had a world effect on the world like no other. But then Jesus also said there will be times that this as the church is growing, he instilled this information to John. As the church is growing, it's going to start seeing a decline on faithful individuals. And I do want to say this, that John said, he said, they were in us, but they were not of us. For if they'd been of us, they would no doubt continued with us.
Yes.
And them leaving just manifested they were never of us. So anyway.
Right.
And if anybody has a problem, you just call the church and talk to me, and I can prove what I'm saying is true. Anyway, one important factor behind the growth of religiously unaffiliated is generational replacement, the gradual supplanting of older generations by newer ones. That's what I just said. But generational replacement is not the only factor at play. Generation Xers and baby boomers also have become more religiously unaffiliated in recent years. In 2012, 21% of the Gen Xers and 15% of baby boomers described themselves as religiously unaffiliated up slightly, but strategically significant margins from 18% and 12% respectively in 2007. Now that number will have grown by the time this year has come. The continual growth of the religiously unaffiliated is one of the several indicators suggesting that the U.S. public gradually may be growing less religious. And of course, we can see that now. To be sure, the United States remains a highly religious country, particularly in comparison with other advanced industrial democracies, and in some measures of religious commitment in America have held remarkably steady over the years. So if this is a sign that says America is one of the most religious countries in the world, what is that saying about the state that our globe is in?
Right.
So, the percentage of Americans who say they never doubt the existence of God have fallen modestly but noticeably over the past 25 years. In 1987, 88% of adults said they never doubt the existence of God. As of 2012, this figure was down 8 percentage points to 80%. And it's gone higher than that. So just 5% say they attend worship service on a weekly basis. And of course, you can pull this up. The religiously unaffiliated population is less convinced that religious institutions help protect morality. Just half say this considerably lower than the share of the general public that views churches and other religious organizations as defenders of morality. 52% versus 76%. Anyway, there's a lot more, and of course, time won't permit me to deal with the knowns. But on the other, another article came out in U.S. decline of Christianity continues at a rapid pace. I'm not going to deal with this too much. I'll deal with this at another time. But the graphs are staggering, and I'm going to tell you, I was talking to you earlier. One of the problems that we have is the downslide of this area of religious Christianity is a big part on the Baptist people. I believe that, and when you compare, I was dealing with this with the comparison of Israel with Baptists today. When you go back to Jeremiah was dealing with this as God was dealing with the preaching to the people. There were some areas of what happened to Israel. First of all, Israel was identified as God's people. She's always been God's people. They identified themselves. There were certain laws, and of course, when we come to circumcision, that was an outward procedure that showed they belonged to God, separated. Israel was sanctified. Then we come into some things that she becomes culturalized. Israel becomes reformationalized, and then she becomes traditionalized, and Israel ended up paganized. And of course, when you get to Jeremiah chapter 5, verse number 30 and 31, Jeremiah writes by the inspiration of God himself, a wonderful, and by the way, when we use the word wonderful, that doesn't mean it is a good way, but he said, a wonderful and horrible thing is committed in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means, and my people love to have it so. And what will you do in the end thereof? Well, I began to compare some things that has brought me to the place that I begin to understand why names are being dropped, why we're seeing this area of what I call, and we talked about this, the emerging church. I'm going to deal with that in just a moment. But when you deal with the Baptist people, and I'm going to go on record to say this, that the Baptists at one time were identified as God's people to do the work that Christ set them out. Now, they had not always been called Baptist people, and we need to be aware of that. The first indication of title was they were first called Christians in Antioch, and you're familiar with that, Brother Joe. And they were called by the pagans the lost people because they were separate. They were separate The people could look and there was something. They didn't call themselves that. But Baptists were like Israel. They were identified. Baptists were sanctified. They were separated. Then you begin to see, and we'll talk about this in persecution, but then when you begin to even read in the area of not only the area of other countries, when I'm talking about where the church started, but here in America, Baptists began to be ostracized. They were imprisoned. They were cast out of their own homeland. They were taxed. And they, as time goes on, they begin to get strengthened, but then they start reformationalizing themselves, and then they become traditionalized, and then we're seeing now that are becoming culturalized. They're moving with the culture to gain the crowd. Now that's a dangerous place to be. If I'm not careful, I'm gonna get preaching here, and I'm a little bit aggravated, but. And then as we keep going on, and I'm going to tell you, Baptists will soon be paganized.
So.
Ooh, what was that? I'm hearing voices. But this area of the emerging church, which is affecting, this is a term that, and I'm going to tell you folks basically what the emerging church. I told Brother Joe, and in fact, what was it that you said that somebody was asking you to do something on the emerging church or something?
I had a chaplain colleague when I was in the Civil Air Patrol, and he and I were pretty good buddies. And but he was a Nazarene preacher, and very well educated in his beliefs. And we had some, I won't say knockdown dragouts, but we had some very intense discussions on Bible doctrine. But anyway, he suggested to me one time that I do a study on the emerging church. And then at that time I was writing articles, and I had an email list in that I would send it out. And I asked for suggestions. So the next time he saw me, he said, hey, brother, he said, why don't you research and write on the emerging church? I said, what's that? And he told me. And so he said, I tell you, he said, it's a scary thing. I mean,
Yes.
Here's a Nazarene saying that.
Yes.
All right. But he was seeing some of the same things in the Nazarene denomination. But he suggested that I do that. But things happen I never did get to. And I haven't even talked with him for a long time now. So,
Brother Joe will be like Paul Harvey. Now the rest of the story.
well, when he was the wing chaplain in Maine, I was his deputy chaplain. And then when I moved to Florida, I joined up with a group down there called Group 2. And then after I had moved to Florida, he moved to Florida. And then he became my deputy. And so we've had some good times together, but we sure couldn't come to agreements on the security of the believer. I'll get you that.
You know, now the rest of the story, Brother Joe, what exactly is the emerging church or the emergent movement? I can give you it in a very simple term.
Right. Do that, please, because some of our viewers and listeners may not know that either. So
Okay.
that'd be very appropriate for you to do that.
The visible effect of it is this. Now, some may not agree with me, but I'm just telling you what I've been seeing. This, what we call the emerging church, from what I found, it started in the late 20s and early 21st century, around about the 70s. Baptists have been moving into this direction, but one of the evidence of it is when you start seeing what's called the Life Family Center City Church. The names of are being dropped. Interdenominationalism, non-denominationalism, and basically what it comes down to is the names identify the doctrines, but you can't always go by the name. And so basically, if I was to give you a simple visual parable of what the emerging church is, imagine, if you would, a lifeboat that has room for more people, or the lifeboat can be made bigger. Imagine a lifeboat on the ocean with no sail, no motor, just moving with the current. And more people get in the boat. It's just going to go wherever the current is. So basically, emerging church doesn't really have any doctrinal direction. It's moving on whatever the culture is. And so I would say what's happened is that, and especially in the Baptist realms, and I'm proud to be a Baptist. I'm not proud of what's happening to the Baptist churches. But what's happening is you would have, example, we have, I think, 150 different types of Baptist churches. Each one of them will say something different. So you get young people that'll be in one Baptist church, they'll hear something. They go to another Baptist church, they're going to hear something different. They're going to hear something in another Baptist church, and pretty soon young people are not dumb. They're going to say, wait a minute, these people don't know what they're talking about, so I'll go somewhere where it makes me feel good. And so what has a fellow by the name of David W. Cloud, I had one of his books about the attack of the Bible, but he said the reason for what's called, and he wrote this in the title of the book, is why most independent Baptist churches will be emerging in 20 years. And that was written in 2011. So it's
just a
yes.
comment on when you mentioned non-denominational churches.
Yes.
They most of the time these non-denominational churches will believe whatever that the pastor has, because it's almost always centered around a charismatic pastor.
Yes, absolutely.
And many of them will lean toward Pentecostalism.
Yes.
So they're drifting without a
a
rudder.
Exactly, and you've got it right. And so they tend to be pulled to whatever the leadership is. And most, let me go back a little bit. Some will join a church because they like what's going on.
Right.
They will not really get into a dialogue with the pastor, find out what he's teaching, what he believes.
Or many of them will attend because of the great youth programs.
Exactly. Now, according to David Cloud, and this book has really, it opened my eyes up, because we talk about how do we get people to come in the area of Baptist. Now, he's reeling with independent Baptist. We're independent. We associate with the American Baptist Association. But he said the reason that this is happening is lukewarmness, unholiness, worldliness. The lack of, and he said, here's another one, the lack of prayer. There's another one, biblical shallowness. When I read this on biblical shallowness, what really astounded me, he said a truth. I've seen it even here, but he said, and let me get this one page. You've got to hear this. He said, there is a frightful lack of biblical knowledge among members of the average independent Baptist church. In my experience, many pastors have admitted to me that the majority of their people are not serious Bible students. It is impossible to understand the Bible properly and grow in understanding of it effectively without training in such things as principles of interpretation, Bible history, and geography, Bible culture, theology, or Bible doctrine. Yet most members of independent Baptist church are grossly lacking in such things. So what, in my experience, Brother Joe, and yours, is You can preach on a subject over and over and over again, and pretty soon people get dissatisfied and they'll go to wherever the current's taking them. But he goes on a little bit further. He said, the unquestionable loyalty to man, following the crowd, pragmatism. And basically, if you want to know what pragmatism is, it is a logical way of doing things, not biblical. Pragmatism and big-mindedness. In other words, the bigger the church, the better. Soft separation, lack of serious discipleship, carelessness about the music, quick prayerism. It's just rhetoric. But the list went on, and so what is happening in what, brother?
Keep looking at the camera.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But what's happening in the Baptist ranks, and folks, listen to me very carefully, but what's happening in the Baptist ranks is many that sit in the pew will come to the church because that's what they are supposed to do, and then they leave without really gaining what's being said from the pulpit, and they won't take that information home to study it. For the most part, people will pick up their Bible. They will bring it to church on Sunday, and the only time they will open it is when they're in the pew with the pastor. Sad to say, but listen, if we got adults
listening,
listening,
open it then.
Say what, brother?
That's if they open it then.
That's if they open it in, and I tell you what, Brother Jamie, as you're listening, Brother Joe, and it's sad, but on Sunday night, the average church either has nobody, or they'll have very few. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. You ought to turn in on Wednesday night. If Brother Joe's not teaching, Brother Jamie's been teaching on the very same thing I'm talking about. This is nothing more than stinking humanism that's happening in our Baptist churches. I told Brother Joe as we were getting ready, I said, the only thing I know to do is just keep on keeping on. Don't give up. And just I would say, just be aware of what's being said. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say this. Calvinists may not like what I'm going to say, but that's okay. I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. But
Calvinists aren't listening to us anyway.
No, they ain't listening to us anyway. And if they hear us, they're not listening.
Right, you're right. If they hear us, they're not listening, but they aren't listening.
But if you want to know a little bit about Calvinism, I'll just tell you, it's basically God has certain people to go to heaven, or He's going to provide the information only for certain individuals. And I remember years ago, and I've got a little bit of time. I remember years ago.
Oh, you don't. We got another subject to cover.
Okay. Give me about 5 minutes. I've got 5 minutes, brother.
Okay, wind it down. Wind it. Let's see if you can wrap it up.
I'm going to wrap it up.
Give
you an idea. I was doing my thesis, and I never got finished with it, was what Baptists believe. And so
that's a big subject.
That's a very good subject because the idea was I wanted to know what different groups. But anyway. So I contacted the pastor. If you heard him on Sunday, you would think, boy, that guy was downright. He'd preach on John 3:16. And when he preached on John 3:16, I found out the whosoever is whosoever God's chosen, not the whosoever of all. And then over the course of years I've been here, and I would preach about the problems of Calvinism, and I'd have some of the very same people that would sit in the pew and amen go to a Calvinist church. Now you figure that on. That's why we've got the problem. But anyway.
Just a couple of comments.
I was going to say, I'm going to say like Forrest Gump, and that's all I got to say.
The problem with people you made mention a while ago.
Yes.
When you repeat a subject, mm-hmm. People will say, well, we've heard that before. Yeah, well, didn't you learn it the first time?
Yeah.
And then many times you will preach and you will teach, and sometimes for years, and they still don't seem to know anything. Just today, my daughter, she is in a more of a training supervisory position now, mm-hmm. and She said, I'll tell you, she said, some of these people, she said, I've told them, I've taught them over and over and over again on how to do something. And she said, I tell them, she said, if you can't remember, write it down. She said, they don't even do that. Yeah.
Let me say something real quick. It was interesting you said this. A mom was trying to teach their daughter how to cook. Well, I've got something else to do. Well, finally, years later, that daughter would say, well, how do you do this? Well, I tried to teach you. Now,
Yes, sir. There is a point of no return.
You got it. And I'm afraid that's what's happening in the Baptist church.
Yes.
I'm sorry, brother.
All right. Well, to take us to the top of the hour, we want to address a situation that's becoming more and more of a problem for God's people, and that is persecution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to begin, open up this discussion, I want to read from Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 through 17. And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. Let me pause here for just a minute. These first few verses do not necessarily pertain to what we're about to discuss now, but it does lay the foundation. That's the reason I wanted to read it. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, I'm told that a mite was the very smallest denomination of the money at that time. So it was very, very little. And he said, of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast in more than they all. For all these have of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God. But she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had. And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said, as for these things which ye behold, the days will come, in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another, and that shall not be thrown down. And they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? And he said, take heed that ye be not deceived. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified. For these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. And then he said unto them, nations shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in divers or different places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. But before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. But it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And when ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren, and kinfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. Now, this is just one of the many passages in the Scriptures that indicates that God's children can and will face persecution.
Yes.
Now, we Americans, we don't see a lot of it yet. Emphasis on yet. It's going on, but we don't see a lot yet. But rest assured, there will be very soon. During the time of the Roman Empire, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of God's children met their death. Then we get to the Dark Ages. Now, what I'm about to read you now is a quotation from an article entitled Estimates of the Number Killed by the Papacy in the Middle Ages and later. Written by David A. Plastid, copyright 2006. In his introduction, he writes, and I quote, "For 2 or 3 centuries, many Protestants have given figures concerning the total number of people killed directly or indirectly by the papacy during the Middle Ages." Now, if you're wondering what the papacy is, that is the whole regime of the rule of the Pope and all the rulers of the Roman Catholic Church. That's what it refers to. The numbers given include 50 million, 68 million, 100 million, 120 million, and 150 million. Roman Catholics typically give much smaller numbers.
I wonder why.
Frequently, the figures are stated without any information about where they came from or how they were computed.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of this note, he says, is to describe where some of these figures come from and to comment on their reliability. Surely, nearly all Roman Catholics, as well as Protestants, disapproved of past religious persecution. So this discussion should not reflect negatively on current members of the Roman Catholic Church. However, events in Nazi Germany show how easily persecution can revive. We've seen that. I'll say this as a side. We have seen that here recently in the last year and a half, 2 years with this pandemic, and while many Democratic governors have closed down churches and all things of this sort. Of course, many other groups have, besides the papacy, have persecuted. And all of us, without Christ, have roots of sin in ourselves. The reason the papacy stands out is that it has ruled for such a long time over such a large area, exercised so much power, and claimed divine prerogatives for its persecutions. The magnitude of the persecutions is important because of this reason. One can excuse a few thousand cases as exceptional, but millions and millions of victims can only be the result of a systematic policy, therefore showing the harmful results of church-state unions, unquote. Now, time after time, true church historians have written about the millions upon millions of people who call themselves Christians have died. And I say true historians because much of church history that you read were written by Catholic authors. In another section, Plessed quoted another historian, quote, "There perished under Pope Julian 200,000 Christians, and by the French massacre, on a moderate calculation, in 3 months, 100,000. Of the Waldenses, there perished 150,000. Of the Albigenses, 150,000. There perished by the Jesuits, now that's a particular Roman Catholic order, in 30 years, only 900,000. The Duke of Alva, destroyed by the common hangman alone, 36,000 persons. The amount murdered by him is set down by Grotius at 100,000. There perished by the fire and tortures of the Inquisition in Spain, Italy, and France, 150,000. In the Irish massacres, there perished 150,000 Protestants. To sum up the whole, The Roman Catholic Church has caused the ruin and destruction of 1.5 million Moors in Spain, nearly 2 million of Jews South America and in Europe, in Mexico, and including the islands of Cuba and Santo Domingo. 15 millions of Indians in 40 years fell victims to popery. And in Europe and the East Indies and in America, 50 millions of Protestants, at least, have been murdered by it. Thus the Church at Rome stands before the world, the woman in scarlet on the scarlet-colored beast, a church claiming to be Christian, drenched in the blood of 68 millions and 500,000 human beings. Now he took this from W.C. Brownlee in his work, Letters in the Roman Catholic Controversy in 1834, pages 347 through 348. Now, persecution of God's people continued up to this present day. Now listen to this. From Christianity.com, an article written by Dan Wooding, quote, more Christians have died for their faith in this current century than all other centuries of church history combined, unquote. Now that was looking at a timeline of period from what he was referring to from 1901 to 2000. Quoting further, worldwide persecution continues in many other countries such as Sudan. In 6 years, more than 1.3 million Christians and other non-Muslim people have been killed in this African nation, more than Bosnia, Chechnya, and Haiti combined. Sudan is characterized by the total or near complete absence of civil liberties, said Christian activist Nina Shear during U.S. Congressional Human Rights Caucus hearings. Individual Christians, including clergy, have over the past few years been assassinated, imprisoned, tortured, and flogged for their faith, unquote. The pattern is being repeated in country after country around the world, often in areas where Islam is strong. Christians in North America can easily forget the daily danger in which their sisters and brothers overseas live. We don't realize that our peaceful existence here isn't the standard experience of Christians around the world, unquote.
You know what, brother? I was thinking about this and what's happened when our troops were pulled out. That was over, what was that? Afghanistan, where there was some sense of liberty. Now, the very essence of hate toward anything that'll do with Christianity is now threatened by the jihadists that are taking over.
Yes.
And people will be killed. There won't be any. There's more that's going on across over there than what we even imagine.
Well, he mentioned Sudan, and Sudan has been a hot spot for a long time, for many years. And then it was divided up into northern Sudan and southern Sudan. I think the northern was Muslim and the south was quote-unquote Christian. I guess, I'm sure that you realize that we're using the term Christian very loosely.
Yeah.
All right. So it's still going on there. I mean, there is still a lot of persecution going on. I read one headline just today. It said Nigerian killing fields is still going on. Nigerians and Jamie spent 3 months in Nigeria working. But it was a little uneasy at that time, I think. But now it's really in bad shape. And the Nigerian Muslims are just wreaking havoc on those who call themselves Christian. Now, they may not be Christian according to the way that we determine Christian.
Yes.
Sometimes, if you're a non-Muslim, you're a Christian. You're considered to be a Christian. All right, and I think that's what happens many times with the Muslims and quote unquote Christians. India is another hot spot right now. Because of the radical Hindus. You know, just a few years ago, you would never have heard of Hindus carrying out the atrocities that the Muslims are.
Exactly.
They were considered to be a very peaceful, quiet people. Now, they're getting to be as bad as the Muslims.
Yes.
And there is now in India a government that is Hindu affiliated. And so nothing is being done by these radical Hindus from persecuting Christians. And I keep wondering sometimes how long will it be before our missionaries over there come under persecution from them.
Well, you know, it's interesting that, you know, we're talking about this where I believe Paul talked about that we are to earnestly contend for the faith. Well, what we're seeing in America, that idea, people don't know for the general aspect, what is that faith he's talking about? How are they going to defend something that they don't know? And so I believe that in a subtle way, this is satanic persecution against the Baptist faith here in America in a very subtle way. If he can draw people away. I was reading Satan's biggest attack is counterfeit. It sounds good, it looks good, but it's far. And I think it's subtle where there's physical persecution in the States. We're getting satanic persecution over here by the very same people who call themselves Christian. It's a sad commentary.
Anytime that you see persecution break out in the physical world, when you see these things break out in the physical world, be aware that in the spiritual realm there's a greater battle going on. And it has carried over into the physical. You say, well, that sounds like science fiction. No, it's not. No, it's not.
So, Brother Joe, the idea of persecution is to rid, right?
Yes, it is.
So isn't what we've been, not only with the physical aspect, but isn't the idea of this emergence a sense of getting rid of the truth in a subtle way?
You know, yes, I agree with you. There was a comment that I just read that with the pattern that the Roman Catholic Church had in killing of millions and millions of people indicated a systematic type of planning. Well, we may not have necessarily groups that are systematically planning our extinction, but I can tell you that Satan has certainly got plans for it.
Oh, yeah.
And there is, around the world now, we have to say, if we look at it closely and we examine it, there is a systematic what's the word I'm looking for? A systematic persecution, if you will, that's going on in the world now.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that things are going in America, we're going to be right there with the rest of the world in just a very short time.
Exactly.
There are very, very few countries in the world today in which Christians, or so-called, are not being persecuted.
Exactly.
Now, actually, persecution is taking place right here in America right now. You just look around.
Exactly.
And you look at how things are going. Look at what happened with these Democratic governors when the pandemic came about, and they began to put everything into lockdown. Well, when things eased up a little bit, they eased up on just about everything except churches.
Yeah.
They kept the churches in lockdown. Why? Well, they would keep the churches shut up, but they would allow these masses to conduct all of these riots and everything without trying to put a stop to it, without condemning it, but yet they let churches stay closed. Mm-hmm. And they would, especially in Canada, they would very much prosecute the pastors and church members if they violated any of the lockdown orders.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't make sense. They say follow the science. Well, the science is the lockdowns didn't do any good. They only hurt the problem, aggravated it.
Yeah.
And the wearing of masks and all of that, well, the science has proved that wasn't good either. Mm-hmm. So it's all about control, brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Absolutely.
And it's part of what Satan has planned in order to bring our country to its knees.
Yep.
Another headline that I read just today, the Chinese have passed a law that now the current president and chair of the Chinese Communist Party, I say his name, Xi something like that.
Xi Jinping.
What?
Say it again.
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping? Is that what you said?
Z. Xi pronounced Z in Chinese.
Oh,
yeah. He has been allowed now to have a third 5-year term, and he will probably be in there for life.
Yeah.
And what this headline said, that this will bode evil for Christian people in China, because China has now undertaken a very horrific campaign to do away with God's people in China.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we are coming down close. Let's see what time we got here. We got about 4 minutes before the top of the hour. Yep. Brother Jamie, let's have some of your comments, and then Brother John, how about you? And then we'll take our break at the top of the hour.
Go ahead, Brother John.
If you're curious as to if you are in one of these, what did you call those churches?
Emergent churches.
Emerging churches. Look at the doctrines.
Yep.
There's going to be a lot of stuff about God. God is love. But the doctrines that you're going to be brought about are what they call the soft doctrines.
Yeah.
And these soft doctrines, because they don't want to offend anybody. And there's a problem with that. And it was spoken of much in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you see these persecutions that are going on, hold on. When you see these persecutions going on, then you see that, yes, the pandemic gave them a reason to what they've wanted to do for a long time, and that is basically shut down the church. Mm-hmm. They've looked for a reason, they think they have a reason, and they are running with it.
Yeah.
Great thing about living in Florida, and I'm just as proud to be a Floridian as I am a Baptist, is that Governor DeSantis is doing everything right.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, as far as this pandemic goes. And he's invited anybody who is a policeman or a fireman or something that doesn't want to take the vaccine, they live in one of these Democratic places, come down to Florida. We'll give you $5,000. We don't have to retrain you. We'll hire you. But Florida now has one of not the lowest COVID-19. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost a dead thing down here. You look out of California with all their mandates and everything, they have more COVID-19 cases than we have down here in Florida.
Yeah, Governor Newsom took his booster shot and it made him sick. He was out of the public eye for several days.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's did either of y'all see the second grader here in Florida who got up in front of the school board? God bless this lady. God bless this girl and her family. And
I read about that.
Yeah, 38 times she was suspended from school for 3 days. She's going to fail the second grade now because of this, even though the fact she's going to complete everything, but because of her quote unquote attendance. And when she finished up, she told them that she's going to continue to not wear the mask because an executive order put out by our governor says they can't force her to wear a mask. They cannot mandate a mask. So they need to obey the laws, quit punishing her, and she hopes they go to jail for it.
Yeah.
God bless her.
Yes, sir.
I wish we could get politicians with that much gut.
Isn't that the truth? Well, we're going to take a short break. We invite you to please stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll be back soon. And when we come back, the gentleman that you just heard on speaking about this is Brother John Scott Risch, Bible teacher from Melbourne, Florida. And he's going to lead our discussion when we come back from off of the break in our Fact or Fiction part of the program. We're going to be discussing Jesus died on Friday, fact or fiction. So don't go away, hang around, and we're just going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Boy, I like that music. That fellow was an excellent pianist, I tell you. Well, welcome back to our second half of our program this evening. In this segment of our broadcast, Bible teacher John Scott Raish, one of our guest co-hosts, will be leading our discussion concerning Jesus died on Friday. Fact or fiction? In our weekly Fact or Fiction, we're considering several things of the Bible that many people do not consider a truth or falsity of a subject. And those of us who are involved in this program that you see and hear, we're all seasoned in the Lord's work and in our knowledge of the Bible. Basically, if we are unable to find it in the Scriptures, it probably cannot be found. Now, I'm not saying this to try to brag or set ourselves above anyone else, but between the five of us, we have over 100 years, well over 100 years of service to our Lord. And that's not a bragging point either. Just to let you know that we have the experience to try and answer the questions. And is it fact or is it fiction? Well, we're going to be able to do that, at least with the Lord's help and the leadership of the Holy Spirit. We can do nothing without that. So to start off the session this evening, we're going to determine is it fact or fiction concerning the subject of Jesus died on Friday. Fact or friction? Friction, yeah. Fiction, not friction. Does call friction too sometimes. Well, leading our discussion this evening will be guest co-host John Scott Raish. Lead on, Brother John.
Okay, to sum it up real quick, the answer is fiction. Now, and this is what it's based on. First off, let's look at the definition of a day. For us, it starts at midnight, ends at midnight. One day a year, we have a 25-hour day. Another, we have a 23-hour day. If you live in any place that is stupid enough to do something about daylight savings time. This is nothing that the Hebrews, at least back in the old days, had to worry about because the day began at sunset. You go back to Genesis chapter 1, and it reads, in the evening and the morning the first day, and same thing about the second day and all the way through. Second thing was, the Jews in the old days, at least, I don't know about now, they only had one day with a name. You had the first day, the second day, the fifth day, the sixth day, and the Sabbath. They didn't refer to it as the seventh day. It was the Sabbath. And so what's the big deal about all that? Some people say it doesn't really matter if he died on a Wednesday or died on a Friday. I'll be honest. If Jesus actually died on a Friday, International Missionary Baptist Ministries is wasting our time.
That's right.
Why? Because if we look, the scribes and the Pharisees, hold on. The scribes and the Pharisees had come up and they wanted a sign from Jesus. And so Jesus decided to give them a sign, one sign. And that was this. And we find this in Matthew chapter 12, beginning verse 39. He answered and said to them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonas. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. I will admit, I am not a forensic mathematician. I can barely count to 10 without a number line. But, and I've heard ministers that I have a great deal of respect for. D. James Kennedy said this one time. He said the reason that he died on a Friday is because a Hebrew would count part of a day as a whole day. I don't think so.
Yeah,
the problem is we think like Gentiles. And so we see Wednesday, Sunday as a bigger date than that. No, go back to the Hebrew. Remember, Jesus was a kosher Jew. Go back to the way the Hebrews saw the day. Jesus died on a Wednesday. He was placed in the ground before the sunset. that little part of the day is not a day. It's if he got in there 15 minutes before sunset, that 15 minutes is not going to constitute a day. But when the sun set that night, that began the first day. And that would be Thursday on their calendar, evening and morning. Now, that day was a Sabbath day, not a weekly Sabbath day, but what they call a high Sabbath day. It's Passover time. And a high Sabbath does not have to fall on a Saturday. I know there are a lot of Baptists who spend very little time in the Old Testament, and that's a shame. It's a schoolmaster. It's there for a reason. It teaches us things, and it sets up a lot of the things in the New Testament that makes them make more sense. We can see the things like the future events that were foreshadowed in the Old Testament, see them come to pass in the New Testament, and use the what happened then to verify what happened now, and what happened now as to verify what happened then. They complement each other. Now, then when the sun set Thursday night on our calendar, that began Friday, evening and morning. Now, that day was the day of preparation for the weekly Sabbath. Did anything happen on, this is when they call Good Friday. I can tell you what happened on Good Friday. Women went out and bought spices. If you read in Mark and you read in Luke, they almost seem to contradict themselves, because one of them talked about getting the spices and then honoring the Sabbath, and another about after the Sabbath they went and got the spices. If we're talking about one Sabbath, that makes absolutely no sense. But when you realize that Thursday was a high Sabbath and Saturday was weekly Sabbath, Friday was a day that it was perfectly kosher to go out and buy spices. And those women were kosher Jews. They did not break the commandments, whether they realized at the time that they were under the law or under grace. That's of no effect. They went out and bought spices on that Friday. Sunset that Friday night, which made it Saturday, evening, morning. Then, after sunset Saturday, that is Sunday. Sometime between when the sun set Saturday night and it rose on what we call Sunday morning, Christ resurrected. He spent 3 days. He spent 3 nights. And if some still want to argue and say that there were the 3 days for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, my question is this: show me the 3 nights. Because if you can come up with that, I'll try and straighten you up on how you learn to count. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work out. And all we have to do is realize there are 2 Sabbaths involved. Mm-hmm. One on Thursday, one on Saturday, and all this makes sense. That kind of pinpoints the year down to 80, hold on. I believe it was 80-24. And that was when the 15th would have been on a Wednesday. No, the 14th. I'm sorry. 80-30 was when the 14th day of Nisan fell on a Wednesday. That would make sense as to how we do our calendar and everything. And that's still not guaranteeing that was exactly when, but figuring that our calendar is 3 to 4 years off because, well, it's a man-made calendar. And Christ is accepted as living for 33 years. 80-30 would be about right. But the best thing about Good Friday is I don't work on Good Friday. Our company shuts down for that. It's the closest thing. They call it a religious holiday. I just call it any Friday I don't have to work is a good day. Any day I don't have to work is a good day. And there's nothing wrong with believing that he died on a Friday. That's not going to do anything. But if he actually did die on a Friday, like I said before, we're all wasting our time, because that means that Jesus was not the Messiah. We need to look for somebody else, and we've got a lot of time and effort vested in the fact that we know Jesus is the Messiah. So obviously, Friday is an impossibility. Fact or fiction, Jesus died on Good Friday, that is a fiction.
And that is the
The end.
fiction, absolutely. Brother John, you said somewhere between sundown and Sunday morning, Jesus arose.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometime between sunset Saturday night, which is Sunday on the Hebrew calendar.
Well, I take it a little bit more specific than that.
Okay.
The when God determined the days and the nights, he split it up into 24 hours, morning and night, or day and night. He never has changed for it being something different than 24 hours. Now, granted, the word day, yom, in Hebrew, can refer to 24 hours, etc. The day of the Lord, or a period of time, or something like that. But in context, you have to determine what's the meaning from the context. And in the context in Genesis, it is the morning and the evening, or the evening and the morning, rather, were the first day, or second day, or third day, etc. So when you come to Jonah, as you indicated, the scriptures say that Jonah spent 3 days in the 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the belly of the fish. And I think the fish got so tired of it, and he puked him up. But anyway, that's 24 hours a day. All right, 3 of them will make 72 hours. I think God made it precise. Here is, and I'm not trying to prove you wrong or anything, but I look at 72 hours. At the end of 72 hours, I think Jesus came out of that grave.
Yeah.
I think it was even specific enough that when the hour 72 came, the first second after the 72 hours ended, Jesus was out of there.
Mm-hmm. They couldn't even go in there until that weekly Sabbath was over.
Right.
That was part of work.
Right.
So they couldn't go in there. When they
Brother
went
Bernie,
there, he's already gone.
Got to get you in front of the mic, Brother Bernie.
Excuse me, thank you. He was already gone.
Yes. Yes, he was.
I'm biting my tongue. Want to say something right now?
You ain't biting your tongue at all.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brother Joe.
The Jesus the stone did not have to be rolled away for him to come out of there. I don't think he came out the door anyhow.
It was rolled away for our benefit.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say it was rolled away for our benefit. But go ahead.
Yeah.
That's right. It was. It was rolled away for our benefit, that we could see, man could see that Jesus was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And 72 hours after the time that he was put into that grave, and even before that it was sealed, it wasn't sealed until afterwards, but 72 hours from the time that Jesus went into that grave, he was resurrected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because that he had
I was going to say, if you think about it, so it was the Romans who sealed the grave. I don't think they were worried about sunup or sundown. They're going to seal that grave, and Passover meant nothing to them. So Jesus' followers got him in the grave before the sun went down. And like you said, count 72 hours from the point that the Romans went and sealed everything, because now he's in, his body is in, I won't say his body's in the heart of the earth, because that's where he went. But he was entombed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question.
Yeah.
If we say 72 hours, that makes sense to me. But look at what happened when they came to the tomb. Jesus met Mary and said, "Don't touch me. I have not yet ascended to my Father." Remember that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus had already done what he was meant to do. He had died. He was buried. He rose again. But in rising again, he took the keys of death and hell from Satan. He has control over death now. Satan no longer controls it. Jesus could have already have ascended to the Father and already put his blood on the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies in heaven. He could have already done all of that, but he didn't. He waited. This is just my thinking. He waited because he knew they were coming, so they would see him, witnessing the fact that no one took his body, so that his believers would have proof that no one took his body,
Right.
that he left on his own. He did what he was supposed to do, and he was going to see the Father.
Another thing, following that train of thought, is yet later on we see where the disciples were. He told Peter to touch his side, to feel his wrist. So between that and there, he did ascend to his Father. The Bible doesn't record how many times he went to his Father and then returned. We get the last trip, his final ascension into heaven. But there's nothing that really says that that was the only time he went up.
That's true.
You're right.
True.
He had to present his blood. He had to present his blood to his Father. But there are many times there that you don't always see him for at least for the first couple of days or so. Nothing was mentioned between him meeting with them on their Sunday night meeting and then a week later on that Sunday night meeting. We don't see anything of him there, so that doesn't mean that he spent all this time up there or down here. We don't know.
Well, here's another thing. Excuse me. Here's another thing that you have to consider. He gave the message. He had told them previously, but he told Mary, he said, "Tell them that I will meet them in Galilee, just as I said." Mm-hmm. And okay, that's another instance that we don't know when exactly that was. I think Jamie and I have studied that part out pretty thoroughly, and we have yet to determine exactly when that took place, because Galilee was some journey from Jerusalem, where they were when Jesus arose. So, I mean, Jesus could have been there at the snap of your finger, but the rest of them would have had to have taken a very arduous journey to get there. But they went there, and then they're back again in Jerusalem. And if you didn't...
I don't think it was as arduous as you think it is, because with everything that just happened, I'm pretty sure they went there in some kind of haste.
Well, yeah.
They wanted to see the Lord again.
Probably so. Probably so.
They had some unction to their function.
Yeah. Well, we got two different locations, you see, and we still do not know everything that happened during those 40 days after he.
Except the fact that I'm sure he had the disciples at full attention at that point. There might have been some points where they heard him, but it didn't really sink in. But I think that after the resurrection, they were focused.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think a lot of the stuff he said made sense then.
Yeah. I got
where he made mention of some things that they would not understand yet.
Yeah.
One of the things that he said that is no big deal to us, but really was probably something to the disciples was when he said, if any man will follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. That take up his cross part, really, I don't see how that made any sense to them, because that'd be like a Frenchman in the 15th century saying, pick up your guillotine and follow me. A cross was a form of execution. We see how that was used, and it makes sense to us. I don't think it necessarily made sense to them at the time.
That's true. That's true. And that's why I say that I think a lot of the things that Jesus spoke to them and taught them prior to that didn't make sense until that point, till his resurrection.
And then they could see what happened, and because they were eyewitnesses, and then they could understand what it meant when to take up their cross. I think they caught the spiritual meaning of it after that.
Well, and one of the other things that, they didn't understand, and he said that you wouldn't understand, was the 3 days.
Right.
The temple being tore down in 3 days and built back again. That made no sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
They had no frame of reference, like Brother John said about the cross. They had no frame of reference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have a lot more frames of reference looking back now than they did at the time when he would say some of the things that he said, and it just wouldn't make sense. And I think if we were in that position, a lot of things wouldn't make sense either.
Right, I agree. What I think that when Jesus said for them to meet him in Galilee, I think that was soon after that he arose, and not too long after his conversation with Mary. Because later on, as John pointed out, that he met them there in the upper room.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, and in that meeting, Thomas was absent. And when he was told about it, he didn't believe it, basically. But then when they met again the next time, on the next Sunday, I think as John pointed out, Thomas was there. And Jesus, if you look at those two accounts, Jesus appeared in their midst. And because the first time, because the windows and the doors are all shut because they were afraid of the Pharisees and Sadducees. They were afraid they were going to be arrested and no telling what done to them. But if Jesus had some instructions to pass on to them, why couldn't he have done that on the first day of the week instead of taking them up into Galilee?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Why would he have taken them into Galilee? Now that we have established the fact that Jesus dying on Friday is fiction, fact is fiction.
Can I say something?
Yeah. You can say so. Raising his hand in
well,
here.
Good. Yeah, I've been. The interesting thing about it, too often we take, as you said, Brother John, that we've got to determine, number two, the high Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath. And then when did the Sabbath begin? According to Jewish mindset, that day would always begin at sundown, not midnight as we. So I was looking at this where it said the Jews, therefore, because it was a preparation and the body should not remain on the cross, for that Sabbath day was a high Sabbath. That was different than a weekly Sabbath. That day was a day of atonement. That would be when the sacrifice would be given. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. The weekly Sabbath, no work could be done. So that eliminates the aspect of a Friday crucifixion because you're teetering on these things. But then on the aspect of the weekly Sabbath, she wouldn't even come. She had to wait until the weekly Sabbath was done to come to the tomb. He was already gone. The problem in this idea of Friday to Sunday, and tried to mix these ideas that he was crucified on Friday and then he rose again on Sunday. In fact, if that was the case, he would have only been in the tomb one day, if you think about it. It like you say, Brother John, it doesn't make sense. But I think we covered this some time ago. When was the high Sabbath? They were permitted to do sacrifices and all those things. You got to go way back to the previous week to know how this begins. And so I began to look at this. The Jewish perspective is always different than the Gentile perspective. And I think we get this idea of a Friday crucifixion from the Roman Catholic ideas. We talked about that. But I still can't get over this fact that day was a high Sabbath. There was a lot of preparation to be made before that time of sacrifice. And it's interesting that when Jesus goes into the temple, they didn't want to get any. They would prepare and getting the things ready for that Passover time, make sure that everything was gleaned and clean. But yet they had murder on their mind. But like you said, Brother John, really they did. They had murder on their mind. And yet it's sad, this traditionalism. But again, Brother John, you can't get, like you said, you can't get 3 days and 3 nights according to the Gentile mentality. You can get it. You can get what happened by what the Bible said. The Day of Atonement, you find it in Leviticus 23. And then again, when you get to Sunday, and I looked at this, the first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene. When did the first day of the week begin? That actually began on Saturday.
Saturday night.
And then they go early in the morning. So that would be sometime after midnight. He's already gone. But they would.
You know what the amazing timing on that is? And I say amazing.
Yeah.
God did all this on purpose. That was the wave offering of the first fruits.
Yeah. But
look how many people were resurrected with Jesus on that first resurrection Sunday.
Yeah.
That was the wave offering of the first fruits.
Exactly. His crucifixion always coincided with what they had been doing up to that time. It was what they'd been doing up that time. Sacrifices was a picture of what he would do that precise time. And now as Gentiles, we got that all kind of messed up, I had a preacher tell my wife, said, he doesn't, Brother Bernie doesn't really believe that, does he? And my wife said, not only does he believe that Christ was not crucified on Friday, he preaches it, so amen, so.
Yep. Amen.
Well, we try to fit everything. We have a tendency to try to fit everything into our frame of reference, and you can't do that.
No.
You have to understand the Jewish culture.
Exactly.
That God established, not themselves.
Yeah.
They've got some culture now that's so far off in left field, you need a telescope to find them. It doesn't even come close to Old Testament scripture.
The year is on the first day of the 7th month. How does that make sense?
Yeah, within our frame of reference, that's crazy.
Yeah.
As Brother Bernie has a habit of saying, you must be nuts, man.
Yeah. They look at you like one preacher said, you start preaching what we've been talking about, they'll look at you like a blind dog in a meat house.
Yeah. I keep wondering about that blind dog. Did he ever go out of there hungry?
You know what he does? He goes in there and he's just biting at stuff. He can't see it. He's just biting at stuff. But I go with this. See, Brother John and Brother Joe, when this is what's thrown people off. The first day of the week, automatically they think that's when Jesus Christ died or rose again on Sunday.
Yeah.
That doesn't say that. he was already gone. They go there, the stones rolled away, and then when the soldiers, they see what happened, they go running back, and they were told, don't say anything, just tell them that his body was stolen.
While we slept.
And then what's being preached is doing the same thing, covering up the truth.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
And
here,
something else.
go ahead.
I was going to say the fact that it was early in the morning on the Hebrew calendar. At that point, the first day of the week was halfway over when the sun rose,
Yeah.
because it had started basically according to our calendar, about 6 o'clock or so the day before.
Well, whenever sundown was.
Yeah, whenever sundown was, let's say 9 o'clock, whenever sundown was. So first thing in the morning, you're 9 to 10 hours into the day already. Mm-hmm. It's not like that was the beginning of their day. It's the beginning of our day.
Exactly.
But we do need to look at it from the Jewish standpoint, because this was set up according to the Jewish calendar, according to God's calendar.
Yeah. And Brother John, there's one thing else too is that we need to remember is the people didn't determine when the Sabbath day began or ended. It was the blowing of the trumpet. I think with the shofar or whatever it is. So was it the high priest or one of those in that office? They would blow the shofar, indicating when because they would be on the top. They could see when the sundown would go down. They determined that. And so I believe when those women went to the tomb, I mean, they didn't get right up and but they went early in the morning when that time was over. They went early, as it's going in there. Marvelous things.
Well,
yes.
A question that I've had, and I admit I haven't thought about it enough to do some research on it. I guess maybe I should. But do any of you brethren, do you know off the top of your head when this heresy first began to be taught? You have any idea?
I've got
Go ahead, Brother Bernie.
I've got an idea that, remember, I think it was Constantine's mother that went into Jerusalem and determined where these places of burial would be. What was her name? Constantine was the guy that saw he sees the cross.
The crucifix and said, "By this he shall rule the world."
Yeah. But his mother, she was the one who through the Catholic.
Helena.
Helena. Yeah. She goes to Jerusalem, and she's the one that determined where the crucifixion was, and her idea was inside the gate and all this stuff here. But it is my speculation, and by the way, Brother Joe, I'm just saying my speculation, that a lot of that was coming from what she was saying. Gentile mentality, and then it's just taken off, and that's just my speculation. So
yeah, that's Dixon theology. Yeah. Okay.
That's Bernieology. That's Bernieology.
Bernieology.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bernie History 101. But that's my speculation. I'm not saying that is, but I'm thinking it's about that same time period when Helena goes in there and said, "Oh, that's where he was crucified. That's where the nativity was," and then it became a place of worship. So that's just my speculation. Okay. I might be wrong.
My speculation is that it was during the Dark Ages, when people weren't allowed the Bible, but the priests and all were, and there was a hang-up on the phrase "day of preparation" for the Sabbath.
Yeah,
they knew Sabbath was a Saturday, so to them, because they obviously didn't do a lot of Old Testament research, that meant that it had to be Friday. Because that's the day before the Sabbath. That would be the day of preparation. And they kind of ran with that because the Bible wasn't available enough for people to actually go and look that up. And it just became accepted. And that's my opinion. But as far as when, my personal opinion is somewhere just after the Dark Ages began. because I'm sure that the first couple generations, the first couple hundred years or so, there was no doubt. As many witnesses as there were, and the testimonies those witnesses had, and the strength of the testimonies of those witnesses, there was no problem with when it happened, at least for a few hundred years.
If you look on Wikipedia, just sitting here looking at this, if you look on Wikipedia, it talks about this being started by the Byzantine Christians,
Yeah.
which literally is the Roman Catholic Church.
Yep. That's why they call it Holy Week.
Yep.
Yes, and the phrase Byzantine and Christian,
Don't go
that's
together
just
at
an
all.
interesting play on words. That's like saying Senate. That's like saying Senate ethics.
Right, right.
By the way, that Good Friday, a lot of things had to happen on Good Friday for, before even the crucifixion, for the way they think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was too many things that had to happen
Exactly.
before he was crucified for it to
My
happen on
question is-
Friday.
My question is this: when did the women go out and buy the spices? And if he died on a Friday, Sabbath began at sunset and ended the next night at sunset, I'm sure nobody opens their shop at sundown on a Sunday morning,
No.
so that people buy spices so that they could go out there in time to be out on the tomb as the sun rose on Sunday
Mm-hmm.
to be able to put the spices all on him and prepare his body and everything.
Yeah.
So if that happened on a Friday, when did they buy the spices? Did they leave
Exactly.
the crucifixion and say, hey, I know how this is going to end. I don't want to see it, but I want to go shopping?
But you know something, Brother
things-
John? They could have bought the supplements, the spices on Friday, but they would have never applied them on the, before sundown of the Sabbath. The sundown or the Jewish Sabbath. They wouldn't have done. They would have waited until after. So you can't get 3 days and 3 nights. It's just, but being that Jesus was crucified, they would have went ahead and bought those spices before that Sabbath time. So,
Well, here's another question. How many of them do you think actually thought Jesus would die on that cross? I mean, he was up there, but these were people that knew that Jesus was God.
mm-hmm.
And God doesn't die.
No.
So part of me thinks that there might have been some out there who were saying, I don't know how he's going to get out of this, but this can't be happening. And then, surprised, it did, but because it had to. And that's why they didn't kill him. He had to give up the ghost.
Exactly.
He had to his spirit to God, because he'd still be on the cross if he hadn't right now.
Yeah. And the thing, too, is this. Up until that time, that was man's sacrifice for his sins. When Christ died, that was God's sacrifice to pay for sin. And it's interesting when you go back that the women go to the garden. Jesus appears to them. They go running back to the disciples, and they kind of laughed about it, thinking, "This is nuts," So, he's
Oh, you're Catholic, but if you've been drinking the communion wine,
yeah. So there would have been, like Brother Joe said, there had to have been a lot of things that would happen if this was a Friday crucifixion. There's no way you could squeeze everything in there for what the Bible tells us happened. Am I right, Brother Joe?
That's correct, because he's taken and put on the cross around 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible divides it up into
Yeah.
hours.
John especially does that.
Yes.
And he uses the Roman time, where Matthew, Mark, and Luke use the Hebrew time.
Right. And so there are a lot of things happen. Okay, you've got it takes time to go from the palace of Antonia, which is where it all took place, to get from there to outside of the city of Jerusalem to
And it was not a big journey.
right, and then to put those three on the crosses. That takes time also.
Mm-hmm.
And then to, the whole crucifixion thing, to accomplish. It takes time to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And then with what he says from the cross, the exchange between the two thieves and then the one thief to Jesus, all of that consumes a lot of time. And then you have the period of darkness.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And the stuff that happened in that time frame,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Talks about graves were opened.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of things that happened supernaturally that were not of this world
Exactly.
that are mentioned in the
I think
scriptures.
why. I was going to say, I think that's why on the day of Pentecost, why there were 3,000 people there to be able to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the veil, that was the important thing, was the veil. That was the astonishing and amazing thing.
Right. There were things that happened that Orthodox Jews could not have explained away.
Exactly.
There was nothing they could do to explain it other than him being the Son of God. So you're right, Brother John, come to Pentecost, there was a lot of open eyes, open minds, open hearts.
Yeah. There's something else, Brother Jamie, that you mentioned, which is astounding. When it said the graves were open, can you imagine the testimony of those individuals who now are bringing forth the fact that Jesus died on the cross, he rose again? There's a testimony in all that aspect. And yet the difference is Christ comes out with a glorified body. That body's never going to die. These individuals come out of the grave. They hadn't got their glorified bodies yet, but look at the aspect before they died again. Look at the stories they could have told about this one. Like David said, he will not leave my soul in hell. Can you imagine? Those are things that's just, Bible doesn't say a whole lot about that, but the Bible says that the graves were open.
What makes you think they died again?
Well, they didn't get the glorified bodies yet, so they would still be around. That's interesting.
It doesn't say anything about those people were raised from the dead. It just said the graves were opened.
But it's an interesting thing to
Actually,
think
it
about.
does.
Yeah.
Go to Matthew. Y'all
And-
keep going.
Oh,
Y'all
yeah.
keep talking.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. It's like Lazarus. Lazarus came out of the tomb.
Yeah.
And
Well, they appeared unto many, I
Yeah,
think, is the
yeah.
phraseology
Yeah.
that's used there in Matthew. But that's all that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
I've wondered when
That's true. That's true.
yeah,
what happened to them after that?
Yeah.
Did they? I don't know.
like Lazarus, he died,
But
but Jesus Christ, the first fruits, and it's glorification. And the thing about it is, all I know is they had this wonderful testimony. Can you imagine?
but when he
I know. Your mind's twirling. Did we open up something for you, brother? Can you imagine just for this, whether they died or not? But can you imagine what tales they could tell? Man, it's just
And
Matthew-
Matthew 27, 52, 53, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose
yeah,
and came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city
yeah,
and appeared unto many.
yeah,
And it says nothing else.
exactly. So that's all.
it-
Isn't that marvelous?
Personally, I think they go away. I do think they did die again, just as Lazarus did, but there's no reason to record that.
Exactly.
But I think the biggest difference is the second time they passed away, there was absolutely no fear of death with them anymore.
Exactly. I think the testimony too, what we're talking about, they appeared to many, and I think a lot of that is what this aspect of, like David said, thou will not leave my soul in hell, and yet now the reality of all that. The Bible doesn't say anything other than the graves and then the bodies. They come. Can you imagine trying, Lucy? I got some explaining to do. It makes my mind whirl and twirl. This is fantastic.
I tell you, there's a lot of things I think that Jesus is going to have to explain to us.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? I think when we get there, it really won't matter.
No.
I thought about that the other day.
Sometimes we get our heads wrapped around the axle with things like, man, that makes no sense. Well, we'll just have to ask. You know what? I don't see anything in Revelation where it talks about people asking God for answers, asking Jesus for answers.
Well, you know what?
We'll either know or it won't matter.
I think that when we get our glorified body, I think we'll know.
Yeah.
I think we'll have that information. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say the mystery will be revealed.
Yeah.
It tells us that. So we're going to have all the answers, whether it's by just being there and suddenly everything, or if we get asked. Jesus never had a problem with anyone asking him a question.
Exactly.
I know we seem to think that, and I know people that thought that they don't want to talk to God or ask God about something because they're scared that God's going to be offended by the question. God's not offended by the question.
Yes.
So if we get up there and we have a question for him, he's going to answer.
Yeah.
All there is to it.
Yeah. One thing too, when we were talking about this, if we were in the place of those saints that had died, and then all of a sudden that wonderful experience comes out, happens, and we come out of the graves, what testimony could we say? That's just my mind's just wrapping around this. I got you tongue tied, didn't I?
I mean, here in heaven, we got streets of gold, we have walls of jasper, we have this stuff, and bam, we're back in our bodies again.
Yeah.
Kind of like that squirrel from I can't remember the name of that Disney cartoon, that Pixar cartoon, who went up, died, went to heaven, saw the big gold acorn up there, and ran up to it, but he got sucked back because he came back to life.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they spend a lot of time questioning and answering.
Yeah.
Well, brethren, it has been a very good discussion, and we are about out of time.
Can we have another break?
Yeah.
This has been good. This has been good. My.
We want to sincerely thank everyone for being with us this evening, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have doing it. We welcome you back again next week for the Mayfield Friday Times. We'd love to hear from you. You may write to us at Mayfield Friday Time in care of Mayfield Drive Baptist Church at Post Office Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee, 37167. That's Post Office Box 1676, Smyrna, Tennessee, 37167. Or if you'd like, you can email us at imbr@imbmpodcast.com. That's imbr@imbmpodcast.com. And if you're unable to attend services at your church, we'd like to invite you to tune in on Facebook and or YouTube for our live broadcast of the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church Sunday morning worship service at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time and again at 5 p.m. Sunday evening. The Facebook page is Mayfield Drive Baptist Church, and the YouTube channel is the Gospel of Christ channel. You have to have all of that in there to find it, the Gospel of Christ channel. Our Wednesday evening Bible study is also broadcasted live at 6 p.m. Our guest co-host, who wasn't with us tonight, but Pastor Dan Curtis, also broadcast live the services of the Community Missionary Baptist Church, and they are located in Ashland City, Tennessee. They broadcast there on Facebook, and their Wednesday evening service is also live. We have our pastor with us this evening, so I'm going to ask Pastor Bernie to close us, if he would, with a word of prayer. Brother?
Father, as always, we just say thank you for allowing us to be here and to be with these brethren. And tonight's been especially good. Thank you for that. I thank you for giving us the opportunity to use the means of the airways to get the message out. And I pray today that you would just supply the needs of churches as represented, and those who are hearing us, I pray that you'll supply their needs as you see fit. Those that are hurting, those are sick, those are suffering losses, I pray you'll touch them in a special way. And I pray that through what the individuals hear from this place, that if there's someone who doesn't know Christ as personal Savior, they come to know you before it's eternally too late. Thank you so much for all that you do and what you're going to do. And as always, I ask that you help us to be thankful for what we have, not complainers of what we don't. We ask in Christ, Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you again for being with us. I'm Joe Roberts.
And I'm Bernie Dixon.
I'm John Resch, and while I'm talking, I want to say belated Happy Veterans Day to Brother Joe, to Brother Bernie, and to all the veterans out there.
Thank you.
Include
Thank you for
yourself,
your
brother.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
And I'm Jamie Roberts.
And we wish you all a good night and a great blessing-filled weekend.
Amen.
Good night.
Yeah.